So one day I woke up and I thought it'd be great to see a triceratops versus a T-Rex. And what better tool to do that than Blender? I started off with the default cube. I extruded it, shaped it, then sculpted a basic triceratops mesh. Now I went through a journey to retopologize it. Now this is a long, tedious process, but it's important in order to get the basic mesh right to help the animation long term. So as you can see here, it's a bit of a crude model setup. I wanted to really understand the end-to-end process of creating character, rigging it and texturing it before getting into actually doing the final model. So I didn't spend too much time doing this, but all I was trying to focus on was marking out seams to effectively create a flat UV map that was neat enough to operate and animate. So I did this by selecting the particular vertices that I wanted, Control E and mark seam. Then you go through to the UV editing tab. And you can see the basic layout, the colors there, and that was a bit of a test, but if you go into edit mode and then select all, you'll see the effective UV map set up and you can click unwrap. Now I've already done that, but the actual issue was that the fact that it was already flipped, so there was a few lessons learned there. And as you can see, I sort of progressed pretty quickly, and I focused on getting the shapes, the retopology better, and effectively creating a UV map that I was happy with in order to proceed with the next step. So during this process, I actually learned that it was when you've got those smaller vertices to work with, you cannot texture that well and sculpt that well. And as you can see in particular, the horns ended up being problematic, especially when I got blood on them and whatnot. So I had to use a few techniques to try and overcome that. So it wasn't ideal, but it is what it is. So once I finished the sculpt and it was ready to be animated, I chose to use Rigify and I selected the cat model. Now this allowed me to have a lot of freedom and I could do it with speed as well. I also used constraints in order for the Triceratops to follow a path and just went through and slowly animated a basic walk cycle. And once I got into the habit of doing this, I could do it with speed, which really helped out. As I mentioned earlier, it's something though the Rigify has been so powerful, and yeah, I would definitely recommend it if you're just starting out. I also used shape keys, and that was to really focus on the finer details of just blinking or the nostrils flaring, the mouth, anything like that. They can just add that extra bit of animation without having to use a complicated process. There's certain controls that I like within the shape keys versus that of the actual rig, and that's what I tried to leverage. So once I started progressing through, I got far more confident. I added in little details of imprints into the ground itself, and they just made it that more believable that the actual Triceratops was putting weight on the ground and being interactive rather than it just being flat. I then proceeded on to making the basic T-Rex. As you can see here, I've used the mirror function in terms of just the modifiers. This is a real powerful tool just to help getting one side accurate without not worrying about the other side straight away. I use the same process for the Triceratops as well, and then I began to texture, set up the scene, and as you can see, it's very basic, but some of the best shots that I've seen in films are this simple, where they do just have a flat image, they have a couple of little objects as assets, and then just a few key frames that are actually giving a bit more life to a character. Now for this particular shot, I didn't focus on Rigify. I didn't think I needed to do it, so I just used the basic bone structure. Later on I knew that I had to use Rigify in order to animate the T-Rex. However, as it was a close-up, I could have real control over the bones, as it was a basic up and down jaw motion and leaning forward. It made it a lot easier just to animate really quickly. As you can see here, here's the node setup for the shaders. I used the same setup for both the Triceratops and the T-Rex, obviously with just different UV maps. And obviously there were bump maps too, which helped to texturize the T-Rex and the Triceratops. So it's a very basic scene. The object itself is pretty straightforward. It's not complex at all. It doesn't need to be. And the bone structure itself, when I was going through and animating, because I chose not to use Rigify for this particular scene, I really just wanted to focus on a basic jaw movement, and the bone structure within Blender itself was just so easy to use and to get the result that I was actually looking for. I then used shape keys for blinking, breathing and that sort of thing too. And this example that I'm showing you now is obviously just the breathing in and out of the T-Rex, and that just helps bring that more, or that life to it that in animation sometimes we don't see from a basic point of view. So just these little tips and tricks hopefully will help you guys out long term. Cheers.